Welcome, everyone, to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and today my guest is Grace, and she has a very interesting story. She's a survivor of domestic abuse, but we're also going to get into some different aspects of this today that I think are going to be very interesting for people to hear about, and they're pressing issues in the space, whether people want to address them or not. A lot of people don't really even want to talk about it, but I admire Grace's courage in being able to come on here and talk about this stuff. But how are you today, Grace?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's not easy topics to cover all the time. And I'm sure today we'll just talk about abuse too and weave through parts of my story. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me.
Of course, of course. Now, let's go over, I guess, like the very first post that I had seen where someone was, I guess, giving you some grief about what you had said. And what did you say in this post that got you a lot of backlash?
Yeah, that was actually the only real post I made. Real as in like Instagram reel. I have posted about topics since then, like on my story and stuff like that. But there was only one official post that I made. And in that post, I basically said, hey, in this space, I'm continually being attacked by followers, by not other advocates directly, but I see things happening in this space that I'm not okay with. And I told people that I'm often attacked for my personal beliefs, which is that I'm a conservative. I am also a Christian. I believe in the Bible. And I talked about how I've also like strayed away from my faith a lot at times, which has been a personal struggle for me. So that's half the reason why I wasn't talking about my personal beliefs at time, just because of my own struggle. But in the video, I stated that, yeah, I'm a conservative and I see other conservative women being muted in the abuse space, which I think is really unfortunate. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that today. But I also touched on some topics that to me, it feels like Darvo when I say, hey, I happen to believe differently and I'm demonized for it and I'm attacked and people look into who are you following? What posts are you liking? So I'm like, you know what? Let's just put it all out there so that I can talk about what I want moving forward, but also to have a voice for survivors who do identify in the same way, who are more right-leaning, who get their comments deleted and they don't feel like they have a voice in the abuse space, unfortunately. So that was the main point of my post. And as you can see, the attacking. So it kind of shows what it's like. And it's very nerve-wracking doing. I don't consider myself like a very good debater or like a natural debater. So for someone who feels nervous about talking about those things, it's definitely a big step to take.
Right. And the people were saying what I saw them saying is, oh, you need to take down my podcast episode with you. And to me, that was completely absurd and selfish of them to be saying, because in this space, the raising awareness of abusive people and the trauma bonds, etc., that's the number one goal in our space, right? But someone wanted to take their episode down with you just because they didn't like your opinion about something. And when they do that, they're not thinking at all about all of the potential people that might have been really helped by listening to that episode. And to me, that's a big part of the problem.
Right. I saw a commenter who said, imagine canceling yourself. And I feel bad, but it's so true. I mean, you're essentially canceling out your own voice on a platform that all people are listening to and all abuse survivors are benefiting from. And the really ironic thing is each person who requested their episode be taken down, which was only 2 people actually,
Good.
those are the same people who I interviewed, knowing that we have completely different views, knowing that especially me and the one advocate who she said, you need to take your episode down. I already knew I didn't believe with her religious views, her views on the Bible. I knew she was liberal and I still interviewed her. I never even thought not to. And I think we interviewed about probably over a year ago now. But you'll notice that the second, those same people are the ones who say, well, we're for all survivors, we're for all opinions and beliefs, unless you disagree with mine. So they kind of canceled their own voice, demanding it be taken off the podcast. And it's unfortunate, but you can see the pattern there. It's like just, I'm not going to mention the other survivor because she doesn't have a platform, like a big following. So I don't want to out that person, but it's, I think it's so wrong. I think it's so wrong.
And I bet you, though, there are people that agree with you that probably reached out to you as well and said, "Hey, Grace, thank you for sharing that. I feel really seen and heard by you now." Did you get that too?
I did. I feel like it was a really hard thing to do because, like I said, I'm not a natural debater. Bringing up subjects like this does make me nervous because it's hard to go back and forth with people. It's hard to find the perfect thing to say. As strong as you are in your own beliefs, it can just be very anxiety provoking. But I hope that it at least set some kind of example like, hey, you don't have to say it perfectly. You don't have to not be nervous at all to do it, but you can still have a voice and say something. And so a lot of women behind the scenes message me like, oh my gosh, I was waiting for someone to say something about this subject, like specifically conservative women being attacked. And a lot of the comments too were the same way. People were bravely commenting like, I agree with you. I see this happening. I stand with you. But the messages, like the people that I've come in contact with because of it, I've met so many women now who I didn't even know followed me and to me, it's not about whether you agree or disagree, but it's just nice to meet so many new people who did reach out privately who I wouldn't have run into.
Right. And it's like they say, when you speak your truth and you have the courage to speak your mind, you meet more of your tribe. You meet more of the people that are similar minded to you, and they feel grateful probably that you shared that. So I think that's the benefit of speaking up about it. And is there any part of you that regrets doing it, or are you glad you did?
No, no part. In fact, I've been just I have felt stronger and stronger in my decision as the days have gone on. At first, it was really nerve-wracking. I know I keep saying that over and over, but there's a reason because you see how the response is. You see when you put out a post like that, I'm called a terrorist, a Nazi, a fascist, a racist. What else? I don't remember what else, but there, I mean, I've been called every name under the sun. So it kind of proves my point in itself. This is why conservative women feel like they don't have any space to share their thoughts because you're automatically labeled anti-women. And I just think it's so ironic. So no, I don't regret it at all. Like at all. I stand fully on every word I said. And I would say if I regretted something, like I would say, I probably shouldn't have gone in that direction. But it's only proven my point further how I've been treated since then. And one thing that led to all of this is a pattern I've seen with other advocates in this space over a long period of time. And it's not just one person, but one particular situation definitely ignited this to lead me to make that post. I saw an advocate delete a conservative woman's comment on her post, and the conservative woman, I'm just calling her that. She's many other things besides just that, but she had this really thoughtful response of just like responding to the advocate on why she respectfully disagrees. And there were several back and forths that were totally respectful. And I have the receipts to prove it because I screenshotted it at the time. But the comment was deleted. Why? Because who knows? They're just being muted. And the advocate's response to that was something along the lines of, well, my page isn't just an open forum for any kind of comment possible, so I deleted it because I didn't like the topic or something. Well, that's wrong in my opinion. And if conservatives don't have a space to say, "Hey, I respectfully disagree," then what kind of abuse advocates are we? That reminds me of what my abuser used to do. I accept you, Grace. I love you. You're amazing. Unless you slightly veer from what I want, then you're a demon, you know?
I mean, it's like that post that you said I made the other day about, do you really have empathy if your empathy only extends to people that agree with you?
Right. Right. So that was what ignited it. I mean, this is like a long history. I want to be clear, this isn't about one advocate. I've seen this pattern going on for like as long as I've been in this space where the narrative is you cannot be a conservative, you cannot have more right-leaning values or viewpoints and be an abuse advocate. In fact, you can't even have more right-leaning viewpoints and be a survivor practically, because they're telling you that it goes against your work. That's the exact phrase I saw used in the other advocates like writings. She was saying that if you have views that are more right-leaning, it goes against the very nature of our work. And I completely disagree with that. So yeah, we can absolutely have all these viewpoints and be for women. And that's what I'm standing up for.
Right. And basically what they're doing is they're shrinking everything down to this one thing. Like there's ways to help people that are victims of abuse and be a conservative person, right? They're not mutually exclusive in that way. You can do both. But what they'll do is they'll shrink the world and they'll probably say, oh, you must have internalized misogyny or you must be homophobic or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard those too.
Oh yeah, I've heard it all. I mean, look, when I interview people for my podcast, I've never once thought, oh, they're more left-leaning. Oh, their political stance is different than mine. I'm not going to interview them. If they have an abuse story, and if I'm okay with airing it for whatever reason, like I'm going to air it, whether I disagree with you or not. So I would say more people I've interviewed on my podcast have had totally different views than me. And you can sometimes like hear it in random things, but I've never once been like, no, I'm not going to have that person because we disagree politically.
Right. I mean, because you're the same way I am with it. I try to talk to everybody. I could talk to anybody, whether they're a conservative, a leftist, progressive, or whatever it is. I can talk to them all. And I just don't have that thing in me where all of a sudden you think one thing and now you're just done to me. I can't even look at you anymore. Whatever that part is that I see a lot of people on the left have in particular, I don't have that part. But I think ironically, what also happens is when they do that, it pushes people to the side that they don't agree with. It makes people more conservative. And that's where I think they're missing the wisdom there to say, when you act like that, you're pushing people into Trump's arms, for example. Like that's what you're doing because they're accepted there. Trump's going to be like, oh, you hate those people? Or Trump's going to say something like, oh, they can be pretty mean, can't they? But you're welcome here. You're welcome here. And that's what it is.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it all about left versus right. In this interview, I'm already saying a lot like left, right, conservative, left. But really the bigger picture is I see the pattern where it's being voiced to abuse survivors, whether they intend it or not. These advocates are saying, hey, this goes against my life's work. If like conservative values go against my life's work. And I think that's dangerous because there are so many more of us than you think. That was one of my main messages in my post. I said it 2 times in the post. Hey, by the way, there's a lot more of us than you think. So when you're an advocate and you're for all people or whatever, it's just so dangerous to say, like, if you have those views, it somehow goes against being a survivor.
Right. Did they tell you specifically which aspect of being a conservative is against what they stand for, against women?
There were a lot of really long comments. Trying to think. I would say most people were just talking about how many gun deaths there are in the US per year, being pro-choice versus pro-life, illegal immigration. I'm trying to think what else. Most of the comments were about Charlie Kirk specifically because I said that I condone his death and I agree with most things that the Kirks talk about. So that was not received well. But, it's like, I would say those were the most things that were cited.
Okay. Because I'm trying to think what ultimately would be the problem. I guess they would say that like maybe the conservatives don't fund like mental health stuff as well or something like that. I think, and maybe they have a point with that in a way, but to say it's black and white with it, I don't think that is appropriate either.
I think one of the main narratives against it is that other abuse advocates just claim that having more right-leaning views, more conservative views somehow keep women trapped in abusive cycles more. And that's the part I kind of disagreed with, but they just they truly believe that that keeps women more trapped, and therefore I can't stand for those things.
I see. And I think what they're doing, and this is something I don't agree with either, and I've gotten in trouble for this, but they're seeing everything through the gendered lens. And I don't think that's necessarily the best lens to see the world. So there's a group of people, they'll see the world as, well, the world's just full of white patriarchal oppressors. And then there's the women who are oppressed. And granted, has that been historically true? Sure. But today, I would say it's not necessarily that. It's more like there's plenty of people that are middle income and lower who are just as oppressed. It's not like just women, it's pretty much anyone can be white, black, Asian, Hispanic, men, women, whatever. Like they're all being oppressed by them. So to narrow it down just to that, it's not even accurate. So like sure, I try to see it through there's like the very wealthy people, the elites, and then there's everybody else. And so I think, for example, if you're a middle income to lower income black person, you have way more in common with another middle income to lower income white person than you do with Oprah Winfrey. What does Oprah Winfrey have in common with you anymore? Absolutely nothing. She's
Right.
a billionaire now. She has more in common with Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and fill in the blank, Elon Musk, even. People don't like to think of it that way, but no, her experience is not like the average person's experience anymore. She is so far removed because at that level, they don't see skin color anymore at that level. They just see green. Green's what they see, right? They think, oh, you're on my level. That's it. But everyone else is on this like on the bottom or whatever. But when it comes to this seeing things through that women's lens, I don't I just don't think it's helpful at the end of the day because it splits the people that should be more on the same team. And what's happening in the abuse space here is a perfect example of it. Like abuse, I don't think. I don't think abuse has a gender. That might be a controversial view, but I don't think it has a gender. I think women can be abusive. It'll look different. It's not usually going to be as physically violent, I would say.
Well,
There's
I've experienced that. If you look on my posts, you can see the nasty comments speak for themselves. And so, yeah, as far as domestic violence goes, coercive control, there's the statistics show leaning towards one gender, right?
sure.
Like male on female violence, like a male perpetrator. However, yeah, I agree with you. I think there's such a pressure in these spaces to speak negatively of men. And that's what I don't agree with. I feel like there's this underlying pressure where if I say anything positive or talk about my views with, like, I don't know, relationships in general, it's like, oh, I can't talk about that. Oh no, you can't say that. You can't, and that's not to say anything about like my followers, but I feel like between advocates, especially, there's just some that really like speak negatively about men specifically, and that's what I'm not okay with.
No, I totally agree with you there. I mean, and you reminded me of what got me in trouble. I had said something along the lines of if your healing journey brings you to a place where you hate men or you hate women, I think you're doing it wrong. I
Yeah.
think you're doing it wrong because I think part of the healing journey should be realizing like not all men are abusive, not all women are abusive, and realizing no, you need to like treat each person as an individual. Treat them individually, yes, because there absolutely are abusive men, and especially as a guy that I help a lot of women, I hear a lot. I hear a lot of it, and some guys are absolutely really awful. They
Yeah.
absolutely are. But to think that everyone, like all men are this way, they're all part of that
No, I don't
patriarchal
subscribe
oppressive
to
system.
that.
I
Yeah,
just don't
no.
like it. But people didn't like me saying that. And they would cite these statistics. And it's like, sure, they are, right? Women are more at risk in the intimate partner violence situation. But I would say what I think is this men and women both have problems. They're just different problems. And I think I don't understand why people have such a problem with that, but they do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's tough. It's so hard bringing up these subjects because again, you know you're going to be attacked, you know you're going to be misunderstood, and making a post like that is essentially signing up to be disliked by a large majority of your followers, signing up to be attacked and But I knew that was going to be the outcome. I didn't make that post expecting, oh, I'm trying to convince people to like side with me. Now, in my post, I did say something specific about how I feel like the way that people with opposing views sometimes treat us is similar to Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And I said, if you're trained in coercive control and you can't see that happening on a mass level, where again, the second your opinion, you say, hey, I don't agree with this, that, and the other thing, now you're labeled as hateful and all the words I said I was labeled as earlier. So I still stand by saying that as well. But I didn't say that expecting like, oh, people aren't going to say bad things. I knew it was going to cause a riot, but I didn't do it to specifically divide. I'm sorry. Thought I heard something. But I didn't do it to specifically divide the survivors in my community. But you can see, I mean, I'm not trying to be the divisive one. A lot of people, if you really look at the comments in detail, some women were like, there's women of color asking her to delete their podcast episode and she's not doing it. First of all, that's completely false. No woman of color asked me to delete her podcast episode. Second, I'm not the one dividing people based on color. Like, if you really look at what they're saying closely, I'm not the one mentioning people, like categorizing people by race, sexuality, all these different areas. They're the ones that are like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Like trying to veer the conversation in a million different directions and put words in my mouth.
And I think the people doing that, they're just subscribed to a certain ideology and they just see everything through that lens of that ideology. And I think it just becomes very polarizing. And I think I admire the courage that you had in speaking your beliefs because, I mean, I've been a Christian. I'm not really an actively practicing one now, but that's what they used to say, right? You speak your mind, you're going to get some backlash. A lot of people aren't going to like it. And I didn't believe it years ago. I was like, who would not like it? And it's like, oh, now you see who won't like it. And it's a lot of people, actually.
Right. I mean, the problem is they're labeling disagreement as hate.
Yeah.
They say, if you don't agree with my lifestyle, if you don't agree with my viewpoint, you hate me. And I never said that. That's not true. So I think that's the danger. And as I said before, nothing reminds me of abuse more than the way I'm treated when I just voice my opinion.
And there's
So
certainly
ironic.
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the political discourse, current events discourse. If you know what to look for, you see all of the tactics. You'll see word salad, you'll see Darvo, you'll see ad hominems, you'll see all sorts of manipulative tactics. I mean, lies of omission, half truths, they're all there. And it's important. It's important to see through them. And I think, especially in our space, it's important. It's important for people to apply it there too, not just to people you agree with, but to everything. Apply and take that step back. And I think a lot of people just don't do that.
Yeah. Another thing I talked about in the video is that just because I was in a situation where something was weaponized against me, something was taken out of context and used in the form of abuse, doesn't mean that I now don't believe its original purpose. So, for example, things that I believe about the Bible within a marriage relationship, that was weaponized by my abuser to no end. Like, if anybody knows what that's like in abuse, it's me, where he weaponizes, you need to submit to me. That's completely wrong how he used that against me. But I said in my video, just because I was abused in that sense doesn't mean I personally disagree with the original beauty of it, the original intent of it, that men and women are equal, but I believe in a certain structure of things. And again, Jared's not affiliated with this. We didn't even talk about this stuff beforehand. So don't attack him on this topic. But
No.
I'm just saying this from my perspective. That is one of the things that people have put words in my mouth about, but that's my honest belief. Just because something was used in the form of abuse doesn't mean I have to reject it completely. And I notice other advocates and women will try to spew the narrative about me and other people who think that way. They'll try to say, well, we must not be healed yet. We must still be under coercive control. We must still be brainwashed if we think that. I'm
Mm.
like, stop, just stop. Just, I mean, that again reminds me of my abuser. If you have a certain viewpoint, then there's something wrong with you. You must be under some kind of spell. It's like, my God, it's so annoying.
Well, I think they're also missing nuance. There's a lot of people that they go straight to the black or white. It's either this or that. And it's really not that simple. There's really a lot of the gray area and there's a lot of nuance in there where, like you said, your abuser, they weaponized religious principles, it sounds like. It doesn't mean all religious principles are abusive, but he was using them for that purpose. And maybe we can go into that too. How else did he do that?
How else was he manipulating like scripture and stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was just always using the word submission, which is like their favorite thing to twist, but they forget the part that says, like, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And this isn't all about the Bible. This isn't all about scripture, but he would just weaponize like gender roles to kind of, I don't know, make me feel like I had to pull away from my family more and be glued closer to him, and I had to like reject my family to be like under him. So that was a form of isolation. But just because that was used in that context doesn't mean I now all of a sudden disagree with the Bible, or like that's just what I personally believe. I believe it was intended to be for good purpose, and not that women are under a man, not that they're less, or I should say, like less than. That is not the case. But there's just such a pressure where, oh no, you can't believe that now because you're a survivor or you're an advocate, and I think it's wrong.
Mm.
So, and he would use it a lot with like sexual coercion, like, oh well, you owe me things, you need to like do whatever I want. So that was blatant abuse right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's coercion. That's sexual coercion, exactly like you said. And I think they just use it as a shortcut. They use it as a shortcut to get what they want. So if they want power, control, narcissistic supply, etc., they'll say, "Oh yeah, what better way than to use scripture in this way?" And I think also, like my opinion on the dating part would be this: is that as a guy, if you love the woman in your life properly and you do this, I call the terms called positive masculine containment. And it's something that I think is really important because that's when a man treats a woman like she's a part of him. He can't hurt her without also hurting himself. And he provides her a safe place to be herself and to grow and be who she is and just have that be okay, but to be safe while they do it. And I think that's a good thing to strive for. And I think when a man does that, the woman's going to trust the man more. And it's not going to be coercion. It's going to be, no, this woman trusts you. And there are some women, I don't know if you believe in, say, gender roles, so we can get into this too, perhaps, but it's like, do you believe in a man leading a relationship or do you believe in, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you believe?
Yeah, I do believe in him leading a relationship, but I think it's important to get specific on what that looks like. That doesn't look like how it does in coercive control at all. And it can easily get meshed with that. That was the case for me. It was just so subtly put in there that I think that's the danger of it. But that doesn't mean I ever rejected, hey, when I'm with a healthy man who loves me correctly, who has been proving himself from day one that he's like pursuing me, he's faithful, he is a good man, a good hardworking man, and not it's not even about hardworking, but he's a man of good character. That exists, and I think there's a narrative out there that like, oh, that doesn't exist, and that's what I don't agree with. But yeah, I agree that he leads the relationship in many ways, and but it's there's a natural form to it. It's not like you're under me and you need to submit. Like it
Hmm.
just happens so naturally. It's nothing that's demanded or required of you, and you don't feel confused by it. That's the main difference. There's no confusion. Confusion is the main ingredient for an abusive relationship. You just have the sense that like this is not right. Like something is not right here, but you can't put your finger on it. So I think where confusion exists, that's when it's being used against you. But in the sense of a healthy relationship where he's been um, prove to be a healthy man. Like, yeah.
I think I love what you just said because you said the perfect word. It's what happens naturally. When things are going the way they're supposed to be going, certain things happen naturally. And often that is, I think, a man kind of like taking charge and the woman trusting that he's like going in a good direction. Now, granted, I also see plenty of relationships where the woman's in charge these days. That absolutely happens, and the man's following the woman's lead. I see that. And you could say, I mean, I don't really care. That is what it is, and it's just a dynamic that also occurs, but that also happens naturally. She's not telling him, "You need to submit to me because I'm a
Yeah, no.
woman." Like, no, it
It's
just
not
happens
so
naturally.
it's not so forced or structured. Like,
No.
it's nothing like what you experience in abuse. It's just the complete opposite. And it's hard. Maybe it's hard to give examples, but I think I'm sure people will attack me for this. I can hear it right now. But
Yeah.
I uh I just think that it's so ironic that yeah, if you happen to believe otherwise, we're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to be for women. And I think it's the complete opposite. That I am for women. And I don't I don't believe what people say for a second that, oh, you're not.
And I mean, your track record proves it. You've been talking about this stuff, I think, for a couple years now, almost, right?
Mhm.
And you've done all this to help victims of abuse. And then here they are going to accuse you, you must not be for women. Never mind the fact you did all this, but must not be for them.
I mean, I think it's so telling how people were commenting, "Oh, I feel so betrayed. I feel so disappointed. This is the biggest betrayal I've ever seen." Like, that's so telling because up until this point when I verbalized this, you felt included. They were saying Grace's platform used to be so inclusive. Well, that's because it is. And I have to laugh because it just reveals that yes, you felt included because you are. And consider the fact that you might feel betrayed because of what you've been told. You've been told that this is a betrayal by the media, by other sources who like to spin things. You've been told that if someone like me says these things, that's hateful. That's hate. That's her turning your back on you. So if I'm against brainwashing and if I'm against being told what to think, then I'm against that too.
And what's interesting is they could have saw it the other way. They could have seen it as an opportunity to say, you know what? Grace is conservative, but I did feel supported by her. She was conservative and I was getting helped and learning from her. But they didn't choose to see it that way. They choose to see it in the other way. No, I'm betrayed by her.
And there's a reason in my podcast, probably more than any other subject, I talk about scripture being twisted, spiritual abuse being manipulated and being used as a form of control. I talk about that throughout many episodes of my podcast because I think it's such a huge issue. So, yes, I do make it very clear what I stand for and what I don't, and you'll hear that if you actually listen to my podcast, I talk about that topic constantly for that reason because it's a real issue. But again, I'm not going to be pressured into that now all of a sudden changing my original belief about how that's used in a healthy context.
Right. And that's where the courage comes in and having the courage of your convictions, as they say. And I think that's the admirable part when you because anyone I was watching this Game of Thrones clip the other day. Have you ever seen Game of Thrones?
I have, yeah.
So there's this one scene in the earlier seasons when Jon Snow is talking to his uncle at the Night's Watch, and it's before he realizes it's his uncle. But the uncle says, I think his name is Aegon or something like that. But he had said, like, anyone can do their duty when it's easy to do it. But there comes a point when now it's not going to be easy anymore. And that's the point when you're going to get pushback if you speak your mind. That's the point when if you really speak your beliefs, now it's not going to be easy anymore. And your situation really reminded me of that.
Yeah. It's like the second you say, and yeah, I just think again, the most telling thing was, oh, Grace's space used to feel so safe for me. Yeah, because it is, because it was. But the problem is they associate my views with, oh, she hates me. because she disagrees with me on certain things. So that's where like that comes in. But again, if I'm against brainwashing, I think it fits perfectly. I think if I'm against being told what to think, how to feel about certain things, and you're just told that if someone disagrees with you, it's because they're evil and they hate you and they're racist and they're a terrorist and they're fascist, I'm against it. Like I can see the coercive control there. And again, I'm not putting words in Jared's mouth here. This is just me voicing my feelings. I think it's scarier how people who are trained in coercive control can't see that type of darvo, like words being put in your mouth, and just being villainized. It's like they attack you like a bunch of hyenas.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like the way to disagree in a healthy way would be rather than just say, Grace, this isn't a safe place for me anymore. What they could do is say, what specifically about Grace beliefs now make you think this is unsafe? Like what very specifically is it? And maybe there's a discussion to be had about that. And that at least would be more healthy than what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem, associating, calling it unsafe if someone disagrees with you. That's the whole problem of like everything right now. And it's just unfortunate, but you know what? I made the post knowing that people who were not really for me in the beginning, I mean, maybe they felt that they were, but people who don't have any space for my opinions, they took themselves out. They left my following. So I think a lot of us are getting that courage to be disliked. Not that I wanted any of them to leave, but I knew when I posted that it would reveal that exact thing, like exactly who puts words in your mouth, who calls you all these horrible names, and then who announces I'm unfollowing you, and they have to announce it and make a big thing. Like it's exhausting.
I think it's the airport. They got to arrive, announce their departure.
Yeah, exactly.
But this also speaks to another point, the echo chambers that we're seeing. This is why echo chambers happen. They happen because if someone doesn't agree with others in lockstep, they just leave. They leave. And so the creators, especially in the political world, they speak to just one audience, really. They speak to only the people that agree with them. And that's really it a lot of times. But that creates the echo chambers. And have you heard of this term called gaslighting?
No. Oh, gaslighting?
No, Yas,
No, I
YASS.
haven't.
So that's when someone is listening to someone that is basically saying their opinion in their own, like someone else's voice. Or I should say that better. I should say a lot of people only want to hear their opinion in someone else's voice. And what will happen is they hear someone talking, and the whole crowd will kind of act as a flying monkey for that
Yes.
creator. And they'll be like, they'll say something maybe delusional, and then everyone else will agree with it and say, yes, you go, girl, or whatever, fill in the blank with a guy that's maybe in a black pill world. Maybe they're hating on women in a black pearl world. They'll do it. They'll say, oh, this woman's a 304, and all the guys are like, yeah, she's a 304. And then in the women's space, they'll say, oh, this guy's a cheater and blah, blah, blah. And all the women will agree, yes, queen, that guy sucks. But overall, they kind of lose touch. They lose touch from reality a little bit. Again, there can be some truth in some of the things that are said, but they go too far, and that echo chamber becomes a gaslighting chamber. And then before you know it, that whole group is so far removed from reality, it's out of control.
Yeah. You know, the other thing I noticed, is just it's very telling how you notice the ones who are silent too. And I don't look that way towards anyone who doesn't have a following, or they're just kind of laying low. They're like in my following, or maybe I interact with them regularly. I don't really look at them like that because it's very nerve-wracking, I would know, to make a comment and say something. And maybe they obviously disagree with me, and that's fine, but you also notice who's dead silent, like what other advocates who you were kind of like affiliated with, who supported you, just dead silence. And I have an understanding for it because if you have a business, if you're like doing coaching and stuff, you're putting yourself at risk by siding with anyone. But you do notice who is just dead silent.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I struggle to not be authentic and genuine with it. I know it probably happens to my detriment sometimes too, but I'm just not good at faking it. I'm not good at not speaking my mind sometimes. And I mean, that's why I commented on your post too, because I just don't like it when people do that. And
yeah,
again,
that was very bold. And you just said even keeled, like you weren't even um, making it political. You were just like, hey, why are you guys protesting the podcast? Why are you demanding? You just kind of jumped in there. But I think it's just telling also, yeah, like who's silent. And that has been difficult, but gotta let it roll off your shoulder. But understand there's been a long history here of probably for over a year now. I see other advocates voicing their opinions strongly, their political beliefs, and they are very vocal about it. And I have just always been like, well, I know I disagree with them, but I'm just going to look to the commonality. So that's why I've been friends with them for a long time, because it's like, well, I disagree with them, but we're all in this together on abuse. So I might as well just like look over it. But when I drew the line is when I saw them, again, deleting conservative women's comments who respectfully disagree with them, silencing them, attacking them, mocking them. Just the other day, a post was made mocking, oh, women who talk about submission, like mocking them. I'm gonna keep saying it. Like I'm not okay with it. And that's when I started speaking up, is when I saw that happening.
yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, and that's why people now they're so far apart, because if you can't talk, what is there left? So I think talking is important, but then also agreeing on what reality is, I think is also important. And I think that is something that gets missing too. And like me personally, like I'm sure there's things that people say on the right I would disagree with as well. And depending on the situation, I might say it, but it depends. I think the left's version of it can be a little more, it's a different version of it. And I see it in our space, it's much more okay to have that other view, right? You do that, most people are going to
Mhm.
agree. And it's just okay to have that. But anyone in your shoes, no, now all of a sudden that's not okay to them.
Well, and the problem is there's a lot of us. There's
Yeah.
so many more of us than they think. And it's hard to even say it in those terms because again, it sounds divisive. Oh, there's so many more of us than you think. Like it just divides that line. But I don't know another way to put it. When you make bold statements like it doesn't align with our life's work being advocates, I couldn't disagree with that more. So, am I really the divisive one, or am I just calling out the division that I already see?
Right. And I think that's where they're just letting their one belief system override everything. So they're going to neglect all of the good that you've done for the space and boil it down just to that one
I
thing.
mean, one of the comments, the one girl who said, you need to delete my podcast episode, she has a big platform. So it's no one, you know, that I'm calling out who doesn't already have a platform. But one of the comments was like commenting back to her, another girl saying, I have an idea. Why don't you create a podcast that's for all survivors of abuse? So I commented back and I'm like, well, if this advocate creates a podcast for all survivors, then she should have women who are more right-leaning on there too. Just like I've had women who are on the left who I disagree with, and they were like, "Oh no, we can't have that." So I'm like, it just proves my point exactly. Like you you're going against the very thing that you're saying.
Right. I mean, do you think that people can date someone these days that don't agree politically? Is that even a thing anymore?
Um, no, I don't think so. I I might as, I just don't think, no, I don't think it's possible. If you're married to someone and you guys disagree politically, there's ways to manage it. Like you're in that committed relationship, you're so far in with that person. And of course, I'm for people leaving abusive marriages. Like, yes, if there's one thing I stand for, if you are in an abusive marriage, you have to leave because I think it's also worth noting, like, physical violence is not necessarily the greatest predictor of someone being killed by their intimate partner. Controlling behavior is. So if you're in any kind of relationship, marriage where abuse is happening, you need to get away from that. And I'm very, very clear. But if you're in a healthy marriage and you guys disagree politically, like, I think there's ways to manage that. But if you're just dating, I would highly recommend, yes, you need to be aligned.
Yeah. Because it's about people's values, right? To be
Yeah,
not aligned with those important values, like that's tough because that's like it's not a safe place to start from. Because ultimately, emotional safety is key. And if you disagree on things that are that important, I think it's going to be very difficult to have that emotional safety in there. It's just not going to be present. And that's also what's not present in these disagreements online. There's no emotional safety there. It's all combative, antagonistic, hostile, take it down, da da. It's like, where's the emotional safety there? There's none.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, over the last however many days since I posted that, I haven't been reminded this much of what it feel used to feel like to be with my abuser than I have now. Uh, just and it's dying down. Like, I'm sure it'll raise up again after this podcast, but like,
Mm,
it's very interesting. Like, it's just been so intriguing to me how telling it is, how it's actually revealing the very things I said in that video. Hey, this is why I haven't been vocal. This is why I've just been playing middle ground and blown around like the wind, because it is scary doing that. But again, my message to people is like, even if you're not good at debate, even if you just feel like you're not good at confrontation, still speak up, still say something if you can. Not if you're in abuse and you're currently in a scary situation, but there's so many ways to use your voice, even if it's nerve-wracking to you.
absolutely. And I don't know, I should know this, but I don't. But I don't think you're on YouTube, are you?
No, I'm not. One of the main reasons is my ex was always like super active on YouTube. Like, he's like chronically on YouTube, and it always just felt like too accessible to him. Like, it made me feel nervous. I mean, he knows about all my stuff and everything, but I feel like just my YouTube presence was felt awkward to me because I know he like is always on there.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because like I'm on every platform, and Instagram is by far one of the more left platforms, by far. But YouTube, on the other hand, more right, if anything. It's more moderate to right. So my audience on YouTube is much different than the audience on Instagram. The things I'll get ripped for on Instagram, I do not get nearly as ripped for on YouTube. So the reason I'm saying this is if you were to do stuff on YouTube, if you felt comfortable to do it, and talking as you're talking to me right now, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that are all for it. There'll be
Yeah,
a
it's
lot. You could
interesting.
probably get a big following doing that, honestly.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, and people say don't bring politics into it, don't bring politics into the space of abuse. But I see a lot of crossovers. I know I can only speak from personal experience now, the way I've been treated. And it doesn't have to be about left versus right. I just see mistreatment happening. So I'm going to call out the mistreatment. And I have a big interest in talking about it, but I've always felt like I couldn't. And I think when you're starting a platform, especially like going back a year and a half to 2 years ago, when I was first starting and you're like making all these new connections and everything's so fresh and new, you're more likely to people please because you're just so excited about um, coming into this fresh space, and you're just so concerned with being liked that it actually messes with the authenticity of your platform. You're not being as bold. But now I'm in a place where, yeah, I still care about those connections. I still care about all those people, but I'm more willing now to be like, I have more freedom in just being authentic than feeling like I have to tiptoe and mute myself and walk on eggshells and like fit into a certain box. It's more freeing to just say what I think. And yeah, again, that's what it felt like being in an abusive relationship, having to tiptoe and kind of like allude to things. It just wasn't freeing.
And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to it, right? If someone doesn't want to talk about politics, I understand. But if someone does, I also understand, because there are important issues out there too that I do think to stay silent on does harm some people sometimes, right? It does harm the people that might be being abused out there. So I see both aspects of it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm.
And I think also the one thing you were thinking about there that reminded me of this is that, what was it? I was talking about the dating stuff. That's what it is. The
Yeah.
different versions of power in the dating world. So there's physical power, right? Physical strength. Then there's your status. There's the strength of your personality and how assertive you are. So there's several versions, I think, of power, but most people, they really only dwindle it down to one. They dwindle it down to, oh, you have more just physical power, plus if you're whatever gender you are, if you're a man, you have more power from that. But I don't always think that's necessarily true. I think the women who run their relationships, I think they prove that it's not true. Think of Alice in Wonderland when you see the Queen of Hearts with her little twiddly dink king. Like that's
Yeah.
that dynamic in action there, where the woman, she's more powerful than the man is, and she has that internal strength. And I think ultimately that's the biggest determining factor a lot of times. Who has more internal strength, who has more assertiveness, that person is generally leading the relationship, whether it's a man or a woman. Sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's the woman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in gender roles in the sense that, like, oh, this person has to do this job in the house and that person has to do this job. Like, to me, it's just a natural flow of, oh, and the other thing I'm not allowed to say, apparently, is feminine versus masculine. Like, I'm pressured to, I have to identify fully as a feminist, but I can't just say I'm a feminine woman. That's a big no.
They don't like that
So,
word. They don't like that word
so
feminine.
yeah. And by the way, if you're a feminist, like, that's fine because I'm for equality as well. Be understanding like what the Bible talks about, it has nothing to do with the woman being less than. But their argument is that it perpetuates abuse cycles. Yeah, because you're with an abuser.
Right.
But then people also come back at me and say, well, I saw a comment on someone's post like, well, Grace is claiming that her situation was just such a one off situation that this is actually like a good design that God created. But hers was just such a one off that like it's totally not common. I never said that. This is actually very common in abuse cycles, which is why I talk about spiritual abuse constantly. So again, people putting words in my mouth, but that doesn't mean I just totally disagree with that, design. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I don't believe in gender roles where it's like, oh, the woman does this job and the man does this job, or she can't work. Like, no, you should work. You should do things. And so people who do identify as feminists might say, well, then you should identify as that if that's what you believe in. But I just don't call myself that.
Right.
But I'm
And that's,
punished for it.
yeah, I mean, that's the archaic version, right? When people try to pigeonhole people like that. But I always say, whether people want to admit it or not, there is masculine energy, there is feminine energy. And if anything, the gay and lesbian relationships prove that. There's going to be, like in a gay relationship,
That's
there's
so
a
true.
there's a top and a bottom. And same
Yeah.
thing in a lesbian relationship. And what do they think that is? That's like the
Right.
top. The top's the masculine, bottom's more of the feminine. And again, people aren't 100% one or the other either.
Exactly.
And the people fail to understand that part of it. They think, oh, if someone's masculine, it means they're 100% masculine, 0% feminine. It's like, no, it's
Yeah.
like a balancing thing where someone might be 70-30, and a woman could be like 70-30 the other way, 70% feminine, 30% masculine, but fill in the blank. And they just don't understand that. But that's what creates sexual attraction, really, is that polarity.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and one of the advocates that demanded I take down her podcast episode, there were times in the past when she was starting her podcast where I knew I disagreed with the topics of her podcast because I don't agree with her like biblical views and stuff. But nonetheless, I gave my podcast advice, like very basic advice, like, oh, this is the platform I use. Here's what I do that works. knowing that I don't agree with you. Well, it never crossed my mind to attack you. Or, like, for example, I had her on my podcast. I interviewed you. I gave you a place to share your abuse story, like, but you canceled yourself. And then also, we would send like memes, or not memes. I would send like reels all the time about ridiculous stuff that goes on in the church, like how some churches are big into like prosperity, like health, wealth, like, and these big pastors are into like making money, which I disagree with.
Joel
But I
Osteen.
would, what's that?
Joel Osteen.
Yeah, he's one of them.
Yeah.
Well, I would send reels like that all the time, like just to find our commonality of like, hey, we both think this is wrong. Let's talk about it. Let's laugh about it together. But I know I disagree on every other, like many, many aspects politically. But again, I don't treat people like I don't out them. I don't hate them. I just find our commonality. But when I say otherwise, oh, now it's a betrayal.
I mean, it's just not good. I think people on both sides do it sometimes to an extent where they think, nope, no more. Like if you disagree, that's it, that's the end. But I just don't think that's helpful. And I do think you would probably do very well if you went on to YouTube and started talking about some of this if you were comfortable doing so. I think there's definitely a market for that. And maybe it's a way for you to be more authentic about it too and be just like true to yourself without having to walk on eggshells about it. I don't know.
Yeah. And this conversation we're having today is just super authentic, like no prep, just we're just sitting here talking about it. So I'm sure if I made content about certain subjects, I'm sure I could really like explain it and kind of like deliver a message.
Absolutely. And I think people are starving for that kind of authenticity either way, right? Instead of just hearing an echo chamber of things. But people talking about issues like this because a lot of people are scared to talk about it. A lot of people are scared to talk about it unless they're just one way or the other a lot of times. But
Yeah.
I think especially for people in our space, I was excited to have this conversation because it overlaps with a lot of things I'm also passionate about, whether it's the dating world or the political world. But this is a thing that leans into something that's a little bit different. That's not the normal kind of discussion we would have.
And I think another topic too is again just the pressures of this domestic violence space that we're in, and not just the term domestic violence, but you see creators use terms like narcissist, coercive control, um, just abuse in general. But within this full space, there's so many pressures where if you don't stay in this one certain box of how you deliver a message or again, where you stand politically or in your beliefs, then you are just the devil. You are blocked, you're outed, you're canceled. So that's again why I stood up to this because it's constant. If and especially if I talked about men in a positive light, it's like, oh, you can't do that. You can't. I mean, I'm not saying that about my followers, but I think there's a pressure just surrounding the domestic violence conversation where, oh, you can't go there.
I think certain things are meant to be. So to me, it was meant to be that you were to bring that up on that Instagram post. And then it was meant to be for me to comment on it because then you wouldn't be here right now, probably, unless I did that, which unless you did that. So I believe in a synchronicity. I believe in like things happen for a reason for the very most part, or at worst, we can try to find out what to learn from every situation that happens. So I think there's kind of a magical element to that. So when you lean into that, you have a little bit of courage, the right things happen, is my opinion.
I will say the only thing I maybe regret is on that post I made, some of my comments did become pretty snippy, like laughing at people, just kind of mocking back a bit. I would say that's the only thing I would change is, but you know, when people are attacking you like that, it's very hard to remain just like neutral and
Sure.
not come back and not be snippy. But if I could change one thing, I would say maybe not mock people back or stoop down to that level right with them.
And this is an important part to go over too, because a lot of people, they really struggle when they disagree to not act ridiculous. Like they just go straight to attacking, they go straight to using many of the abusive tactics we talk about. And again, if that's all it takes for someone to start acting like that, how good is that person? Like how emotionally mature is that person if that's all it takes to get to that place? And I think for everyone, when you disagree, can you actually maintain your emotional self control and
Right,
have
it's
a
hard.
mature discussion about it? It's almost a superpower for many people at this point, right? It's just that uncommon. But I think that's the thing to learn from it. That's an opportunity. Okay, in that case, what do you do? So I try to do that. I mean, and when I commented what I did, I think also because, I have a little bit of a following, I would get in big trouble also if I just like ripped. But it's like, no, I try to be emotionally mature about it and think, okay, what's the problem here? Why do I have a problem with this? And communicate it in an emotionally mature way without attacking the person. Like that's what I try to do.
Yeah, and I think it's just the ultimate revealing of how it's interesting that all of you liked me so much. You said that you felt included, you felt safe, you felt respected, and that this is a betrayal. Again, have you ever thought that maybe it feels like a betrayal because I was respectful and of your differing beliefs? Like I um, never said I hated anyone. I've interviewed so many different women on my podcast. So I think it's just revealing of that underlying truth that, oh, you did admit that you felt included here before. Well, I'm the same Grace I've always been. I'm the same exact person I have always been since the day I started my page.
Right. And I think that's the question I would ask them too. Okay, so she has different beliefs. How does that negate everything she's done? How does that negate the messages that you've been sharing? And to me, it wouldn't. Like the message is the message. And you have to separate. This is another big thing people struggle with, separating the message from the messenger. A lot of people, they combine them and think, all right, the flaws of the messenger will make that message not as good. And it's no.
Well, it's because they think being more right leaning means that you're against women or that you're not for women's safety and health and for them fleeing abuse, that you're making it harder for them to flee abuse by being more right leaning. So that's
Right.
that is their justification, just to be clear. But I disagree.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
I
know what
mean,
other way to put it.
because your views or what you share is correct, right? It's correct on how to help women get out of there. Despite what your beliefs are, what you're saying is correct. That's the point I'm making is that anyone can have their own views as a person. Like and sometimes people do some awful things as a person too. But that doesn't make everything they say wrong. So someone can be a jerk. Someone can be an asshole in their own life, but it doesn't mean everything they say is wrong. And people kind of really struggle to separate those two things. They say, oh, if that person's a jerk, then everything they say must also be wrong. But that's also seeing it in black and white to me.
Yeah. I just feel bad for the people who are like more middle ground. They're very respectful in how they communicate about disagreeing, and they kind of fall in the middle of it and feel uncomfortable by like the riot that started, the chaos that came
Right.
from that. So I feel sorry for the people who are like, "Hey, by the way, I don't happen to agree with your views. I'm totally aligned differently, but like I love you, I respect you. You've helped me a ton." Like, that is so admirable. I don't care what you think. I don't care if you're totally left leaning, but my whole point was don't you will also respect me for mine. You will also not attack me for mine if you're going to be here. So there are many people who message me like, "Hey, I don't happen to agree, but like I'm here for you and thank you for at least standing for something." Would you rather someone help you who just again gets blown around like the wind? Like that was me for a long time. I just didn't stand for my faith, didn't stand for things I believed in because I was a people pleaser and I was being a bit coward in many ways. And at least you know that I'm going to tell you what I think. Like it's more trustworthy, in my opinion, if someone will at least stand for something versus they'll bend to anything.
I totally agree with that. And I think I've known people like that in my life where they might be a jerk, they might be an asshole, really, but you know where you stand with them. And I think there's something refreshing about that sometimes, where, especially if someone's been surrounded by a lot of covert narcissist types that are really passive aggressive and subtle, and they guilt trip, and you don't quite know what they're thinking because they're never quite genuine. But the person who just owns it and says, you know what, if I'm mad at you, you're going to know. And I think there's something really refreshing about that, where you can almost, you feel safer with them, even sometimes if it's not necessarily safe even, but you just feel safer knowing that you know where you stand with them.
Right. I mean, the most disappointing thing for me is when people come out and say, so disappointed to hear that Grace came out as a white supremacist.
Oh,
So disappointed to hear that Grace came out as a racist. Meanwhile, again, if you look at people's comments carefully, or some like stories people made of me, they're the ones dividing people by race. They're the ones drawing those lines. I'm like, I'm not even thinking of who's asking me to take down their podcast episode based on the color of their skin. Like, it wouldn't even cross my mind. And no one of color did, but people were making comments like, people of color are asking you to take down and you're not. Like, what? I never even mentioned color.
right.
So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, who's really the divisive one? It's the people in my comments saying, so disappointed Grace came out as a Nazi. Like, what? This is insane.
No, it is out of control, and I think it doesn't help. It does, and here's the thing for them: it doesn't even help them achieve what they want to achieve either. Like, they want people to see their way and see the way they see it and think the way they think. Doing that is not the way to do it. Doing that, if anything, is going to cement people in their beliefs in the other way, in my opinion.
Right. They only feel like it's a betrayal because that's what they've been told. And you
Yeah.
might disagree with that, which is fine, but that's how I see it. And so if I'm for critical thinking, if I'm for, again, not being coerced into thinking a certain way, then this is what I stand for.
Yeah. And again, I'm proud of you for doing what you did there. I think that takes a lot of courage, and I think it's a it's a situation that it comes to a lot of us, right? Where we have to decide, do I speak my mind, or do I put profit and just keeping my followers? Like, what's our utmost priority? And
Oh,
like,
and I'm sure you'll get comments, so disappointed in you for
I'm
giving
sure.
Grace a platform, so disappointed in you for giving a white supremacist a platform. I'm saying the words that they say to me. I'm not calling myself
Right.
that. But here's the thing. Even before this call, this recording, Jared and I were talking about things that we disagree on, like just that he's more middle ground, and that there's things we disagree on too. So it's not like, just people need to settle down because they're going to attack you too.
I'm sure, and it's definitely happened already with other topics before, and I think it's just one of the big dividing things in our space, and that's also something we were talking about as well. Just like, I see the people in the space, they really lean into the man hating element of what we do, where
Exactly.
they gender it, and I see people like Chris Perry and others. That's what they do. They do that, and it really works. Unfortunately, like, they really just pander to women, and they just tell them what they want to hear. I can't stand it personally. I don't know how they do it.
Well, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. There's this underlying atmosphere within our domestic violence community between advocates where, like, I feel like there's this pressure with the man hating narrative. And that's what I don't like. I don't even know if that's the perfect way to put it, but the reason I tend to gender my posts, like, I will say he in almost every post. I usually do it because I know when women are reading my posts, most of my community are women, but I know when they read my posts, they're like doing mental gymnastics, trying to figure out, am I the abuser? When they read my posts, they're thinking, because their abuser tells them they're the abusive one. So I think it just helps ease that mental gymnastics if they read a gendered post. Unfortunately, it might not always be the right thing. I've been using they more lately, but like, I just do it to help the women because I have more of a female following, and I think it helps them like connect with a post more. But yeah, I know what you mean.
And I think it does. Like, there's pros and cons to both of that, right? If I like, I'll gender a post post in both ways sometimes. Sometimes I'll say men, sometimes I'll say woman. And I get the usual things will happen. If I say a male narcissist, men come in there and get a little upset. If I say a female narcissist, they'll say, what about men? You see
Right,
the
right.
same things on both sides. And I think there's advantages sometimes because, like you said, it takes some of the guesswork out of it sometimes if you
Yeah.
say he. But I also think if you were to display yourself more as someone that isn't about the hating male narrative, I think there's a lot of men that would probably really like that because
Right.
of what happens in the space. They see a lot of the people kind of just they say narcissist, but what they really mean is male narcissist is what they mean. And
Right,
so I
right.
think there's a lot of people that would like that. They would like that, especially from you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Yeah. And I think with my podcast, Why She Stayed, I'm especially geared towards female. It's just the audience I've built. And that's just where my interests lie. I would say that's the main thing. My interests just lie with supporting female survivors. So that's the other thing. I've been pretty vocal that, like, that's just like my preference because I only coach women, stuff like that. So,
I mean, that makes sense, especially because you're an attractive person. I'm sure men would probably try to, like, I've heard this happen with women where
that can
men
happen.
will try to come there and be, oh, we should date or I should come visit you. And I've
That can
heard that happen
happen.
a lot.
Yeah. That can definitely happen. I luckily haven't been really faced with that, but yeah, I think it's just a comfort thing for me. Like, coaching women is just what I do. It's what I know. I don't know as much the male experience. I really just am not even well versed in it. So, um, I just think, yeah, and that stuff can happen, unfortunately, which is definitely crossing like professional lines.
Sure. I mean,
So,
it's scary. Women do have specific issues to women because for the most part, men don't have to deal with that, right? Men don't have to worry to deal with the women they meet online, stalking them or trying to visit them for the very most part. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much more likely that a man does that to a woman than the other way
yeah,
around.
yeah, mm,
And the thing is also, like, if you're comfortable talking about women and that's like what you feel more compelled to do, and there's nothing wrong with that either, right? You got to stay true to yourself. And that if that's being true to you, then I say keep doing it.
yeah, yeah. The only male I've ever had on my podcast is Lundy Bancroft.
I saw that. I was actually going to ask you about that. How was that?
It was good. Yeah, it was I mean, that book, the reason I had him is because that was what got me to leave my abusive relationship. So it was definitely like a personal full circle moment, and it was a good interview. The contents of the interview helped a lot of people, and because he's very to the point, he's concise with explaining, do they know what they're doing? Is it an accident? Is it not? So the reason I wanted to have him, he really breaks down intentionality versus them acting like, oh, it's just a big misunderstanding. That's where a lot of survivors get caught up. And his whole point is, yes, it's intentional, but it's also automatic for them. And I think he just uses good examples to like prove that. So it was a good episode.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot from Lundy Bancroft. And I think because he doesn't use the word narcissist much either, like
Yeah.
as you don't as well, which I think is also good. And I think the one thing that really gets a lot of people messed up is they might blame drugs or alcohol and they'll say something like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's only drugs or alcohol that's the problem." And he doesn't say that, right? He says no. He goes, "It's a myth that it's just drugs and alcohol." He goes, "That person underneath is the
Yeah.
problem, not drugs or alcohol."
Yeah, and he goes on to say that certainly drugs and alcohol will make someone who's already an abuser more exacerbated. It's going to bring that abuse to the surface more, but he's very clear that he doesn't blame that on the reason they're abusing you because uh I mean, look, you have to ask the question, if it's a big accident and it's just a complete loss of control, then why didn't they do more? Almost every abuser has certain lines that they don't cross. They won't do what they personally consider morally not justifiable, which is messed up because that means they believe abuse is justifiable. So he just tries to prove the point that they're not just losing control. It's not just an anger management problem. He has an entitlement problem. Abusers do.
Absolutely. And I think that is very important for the victims to hear, is that it's not just some sort of trauma response or not whatever they'll try to
It's
say it
not
is.
mental health, it's
Yeah.
not, yeah. But those things can cross interact. He
Oh,
talks about
sure.
how if they have a mental health issue, it'll cross interact, and of course, drugs and alcohol, but it's not the cause of it. It really isn't.
And he's good at getting in the heads of the abusers too, because he'll say things like, oh, the emotional abuser will say, well, I've never touched her. And then the guy who slaps will say, well, I've never punched her.
That's what
Uh,
I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do say. And I think it's important for victims to see that. No, they know what they're doing, they know it, and don't believe any of their nonsense deflections or excuses about it. At the end of the day, those behaviors are a problem, and you need to act in accordance to what their behaviors are, not what they say.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's really refreshing for the victims to hear. It kind of cuts through some of the BS that's out there
It
with it.
is. It's the victims really need to be convinced of their abuser's mindset, because when they're simply told, hey, put your abuser to the side, let's just focus on why you got in this in the first place. That's no, they are craving what they want more than anything is reassurance that their abuser is actually abusive. Because the whole painful part of it is being told, hey, you're seeing this all wrong. So the fact that he goes into the abuser's mind is key, because it convinces these survivors, yeah, you are seeing it, right? You're not overreacting.
Right. I mean, and do you see a lot of people do this on your page? They do this on mine, but there's people that will come in there. To me, they're more of the spiritually narcissistic or religious types, but they jump straight to blaming the victim pretty much. And they'll say, well, you just allowed this to happen. And it's because you weren't assertive enough and you had too low self esteem. Anyone could have seen the abuse from a mile away, and
Yeah.
something wrong with you for staying. But do you see that on your page?
Oh yeah, all the time. And that's just a bunch of trolls who don't know what they're talking about. I mean, like I've coached women who are lawyers, doctors, like therapists, business owners, nurses, teachers, like every profession you can imagine. They're very well-rounded women. It has nothing to do with your self-esteem or whatever you let happen. You didn't let it happen. And especially from the abuser who poses to be spiritual. Remember, that's a weaponization. He's not actually spiritual because he lacks humility. He's an abuser. They'll be the first to come in and just twist things slightly to blame.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Tony Soprano, and he would say, "I'm Catholic. I don't believe in divorce." Meanwhile, he'd be cheating left and right, killing people. That's all
Right.
fine,
So
but
he's
I'm a
using it to
Catholic.
serve his purpose. He's
Right.
using it to justify. That's what I mean by they'll twist things that resonate to you as the truth. They'll twist it to fit their agenda with you.
Right. And that's the thing. I think everyone should look at their side of the street like down the line because that's where like the growth is for us. But in the beginning, that is not what anyone needs to be hearing. They need support, encouragement, and validation. Like, yes, you were being abused. That was not right. You need to leave. No, they're not going to change. No, it's not going to get better. Stay like firm in that decision, accept who they are, and then try to move forward. But whenever people try to distort that and say, well, you just allowed it, and they'll try to blame them in that way. I can't stand that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason I keep saying all everybody did was prove my point further of what I was saying in my post. Hey, by the way, nothing reminds me of Darvo more than how you treat us. And you see how everything unfolded. And what did I
Yeah,
really say in that video? Hey, by the way, I condone Charlie Kirk's death because I happen to align with things that he talked about. I am conservative. I believe in the Bible. Obviously, those are big things. Like I am obviously very strong in my views, but I never said, "Oh, I hate you. You have to unfollow me. You have to leave my page. You can't come on my podcast." Like it's just you see my point.
yeah. I just thought it was selfish of them. It was selfish of them to prevent the future survivors or victims of abuse from hearing that story, from hearing what could have been helped from your conversation with them. And now all of a sudden, oh, they don't want to help those people anymore. It's more important to them to, I guess, virtue signal to others this is how important it is to me that that podcast gets taken down. And I just
Yeah.
think that's absurd.
And by the way, condoning someone's death, their assassination, has nothing to do with agreeing with them or not.
Right.
I would have condoned it either way. But what irritates me is like, if you didn't fluff it with saying, "Oh, I don't agree with it. I don't necessarily agree with everything, but yeah, I condone it." Unless I did that, like, then maybe I wouldn't have been attacked. But like when I say it in my terms, then they cherry pick videos of him and try to put words in my mouth. I would challenge you, just watch the full clips, but they won't. Or they will and claim that they did, and they'll still. But you have to understand, someone who is committed to misunderstanding you already is not, you're not, it's just like with your abuser. Your abuser is committed to misunderstanding you. That is what they're setting out to do because they're gaslighting you. Well, no matter if they see the same video you do, they're still going to disagree with you.
And I think just going over that overlap is so important, that when people are committed to misunderstanding you, where does that happen? It happens all the time in the abusive space and all the time in the political world now too, in our current events. And I think it's just as important really to apply them to both, or at least be aware of them happening in both.
Yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, well, we covered a lot.
And is there anything else you'd want to tell those people that I guess were upset by what you shared the other day?
Well, I would say anything I talked about in this podcast that was an extension of being specific, I'm continuing to call out what you're continuing to do publicly. So if I see you mocking women who happen to believe in biblical design, I'm gonna say it here too. Like you're continuing to marginalize conservative women who maybe don't even believe in biblical stuff. It doesn't even have anything to do with the Bible, but you're continuing to kind of mute conservative women by mocking them or acting like it's disgusting what they talk about. Well, I'm saying here and now, I'm just continuing to call out what I see. So if I could say anything, I would say I stand on my crash out. I stand on everything I said before.
Amen.
Everything in my posts. The only thing I would change is maybe having more patience with people and realizing that you're talking to someone who's, again, committed to misunderstanding you. But I would say I don't have any regret.
I love it. Like I said, I was proud of you for doing that, and I'm proud of you for having the courage to speak your mind and share your beliefs.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always good talking with you, and I'm glad you just provide a space where people can be their authentic self.
Yeah, I mean, and it's important to me that that's what this space is, a place where people can talk about whatever their beliefs are, because I'm the kind of person that can talk to anybody, and I might not agree with everything people say, but I just don't have that part of me that's going to be really upset when I hear one thing I don't agree with. So, but
Yeah.
I'm glad you felt safe here to share what was going on in your life and your beliefs. So, thank you again for coming on the show, Grace.
Thanks for having me.